Since
what
we're already talking about subjects, since we are already talking about subjects, what are your favorite subjects when you were like younger, or even now when you in your masters or
Media and
graduate
information
programs?
literacy is my favorite subject. Hold up, let me
Except
change that.
what
Let
you
me
call
change the
this?
battery on my.
Except the
except
subject
the
that you're teaching.
okay. Ako kay history and science. Yeah. That two
Oh.
subjects. So nice. I really love history kay Juan, ang nakakuan ako nga na love na ko history was Juan, second year high school.
Mm-mm.
Kay akong teacher kay actually my teacher dili man gid nga good in kuan. Mag-post ra man ganin siya Manila paper then kana bitaw paklit then you're going to write it ana.
Yeah.
So kana na kuan magud nako ang katong sa Asian world history kay
Mm-mm.
murag story lang yun siya ba. So mo tinakakong wala nice lagi ni kay it's just like reading a novel ingon na. So every time nga nakoy ang mga free time I went to library na mag-read gyud kog mga kanang history books. Unang
Mm-mm.
nice good kayo. I don't know. Ato ra after na pud sa katong during that high school ba. Pagabot sa college kay wala na. Tsaka naman ang history teacher.
It's really the teacher factor, you know.
Yeah.
Tsaka naman akong teacher. How about you, Sir Charles?
Um, at the top of my head, I remember really loving poetry as a subject because of my teacher also. She's very
Mm-hmm.
amazing. It's just so sad that her being amazing did not rub off on us. Um, this is a specific memory that I have with her. No, we are discussing at that time poetic meter and poetic foot.
Mm-mm.
Okay? When you look at a poem, just a little background lang. When you look at a poem in the line, a poetic foot is when you look at a certain word and you analyze how many syllables are there, how many syllables are stressed and unstressed. And it has to be the same with the rest of the other words. And then it
Mm-mm.
creates a pattern. That's your meter. Okay. So if you are going to be asked what is the foot and the meter of that certain poem in that certain line, you really have to sound the line in your head, and then you try to analyze the ebb and flow of the sound so that you can see the stress
Oh,
and unstressed
yeah.
syllable and how many times it's repeated. And
Mm-mm.
when you decide already your foot and your meter, you then look at your list, no, an array of list of a combination of foot and meter, like iambic pentameter, because
Yeah.
it's all iambs and there's like five iambic meters there, so something like that. But when our teacher presented it to us, because she has a musical ear, I think she studied music theory or something. So she just looks at the line and then claps her hands. Like, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Done, 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 done. Oh, class, that's a no. That is an anapestic whatever. And
Mm-mm.
then we're all just like, wow. And then when she tried it on us, we were all clapping our hands even though we did not know what we're doing. And we just made guesses. No, but that really made me very impressed with her because she's really that good. And I realized if you really want to master poetry, and because written diba, is the link of a poem into a song, you really have to study music as well. But I did not have the patience to do it. So siya na lang to. But I was really amazed, and I love poetry because of her style. Also,
Mm.
it's really good.
Pero do
That
you have
actually has
plans of sorry. Do you have any
sorry, go ahead.
plans of like taking up music?
No. Because
No,
again,
No?
I don't
actually,
have the patience. I don't have the patience. I had music class before, and I was just like barely passing it. So not
Okay.
really.
that actually says a lot because like whenever we're in the faculty room, Mr. Child talking about poetry, I always gravitate towards meter, diba?
Mm.
And
Yeah,
you always gravitate towards kanang meaning,
content. Yes,
content
Mm-mm.
rather. Yeah, like I don't know, it was something that
I'm
I
a meaning over form guy. I don't usually look at structures first.
Mm-mm.
I dive into what the poem is really trying to say, and then
Mhm.
after that, I look into the structure. But yeah, that's just me.
Yeah. I go the other way around. It's like I look at the structure and what does the structure reveal about the meaning.
Mm-mm.
So like
Oh.
Also, true.
yeah, like my favorite example is the Raven because there's so much there that's the structure revealing the meaning.
But that's a very classic approach in the analysis, sir.
Yeah.
No? Because like the poets in the past are really into structure. No,
Yeah.
they really plan everything out. Like
Yeah.
I love how Shakespeare does it, diba? All
Mm-mm.
of his lines and all of his plays are iambic pentameter, diba? That's to
Yeah.
follow the heartbeat. Love dub, love dub, love
Mm-mm.
dub. To
Yeah.
be, not to be, diba?
Kaya
So
diba, what is beautiful
Oh, yeah.
before is really the structure, form. That's how
yeah,
they
true,
perceive the
true.
true, the good, and the beautiful.
Yeah.
So it says something a lot about.
But then, if I may, ask you Shakespeare, a lot of his soliloquies were indeed in iambic pentameter. But then, if you look at that big soliloquy of Lady Macbeth,
Mhm.
that isn't in iambic pentameter, and there is a reason that it is not in iambic pentameter, because that is her big sort of breakdown. And when one loses their mind, one loses the structure, and so it mirrors that loss of structure in Shakespeare not using the iambic pentameter. So that's how I look at that's how I would look at it. And
Mm-mm.
now that you mention that it's like a music thing, it makes a lot more sense to me, and it just clicked.
Mm,
So I don't know.
yeah. Okay, going back to the question, how about you, Zhao? What's your favorite subject aside
The,
from MIL?
aside from MIL, when I was in high school, it was the theory of knowledge.
Mm.
Right?
Epistemology.
Yeah, we had an epistemology class in high school, and I think that was my favorite class. Um, that's where we first learned about um, logic.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
That's where we first learned about Aquinas' five proofs, because there's a
In
section there.
epistemology?
Yeah, because there's a section there of knowledge by faith, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mm-mm.
when that class, the theory of knowledge, seeks to well, the way the course description read was, it seeks to answer the question, how do we know what we know, right? And so the way that it was broken down was what goes into mathematical knowledge, what goes into scientific
It's
knowledge.
it's it's basically con. You're just comparing the empiricist and the rationalist.
More or less, yeah. But
Mm.
then, yeah, there was that little module there was that little section um, about knowing things by faith, right? Because that is a type of knowledge, right? It isn't anything empirical, but we can't say that it isn't knowledge.
Mm-mm.
So there had to be a section in TOK about knowledge by faith, and that's where we were first introduced to Aquinas' five proofs. Then, um, logic, that was a lot of fun.
Mm-mm. Yeah,
Um,
logic is really.
Major premise, minor premise, and I'm like, whoa. And it was like completely mind blowing. And then our teacher made us do presentations, and like I went all out with those presentations. Um, like they'd bring like action figures and stuff. How can we say that this is here? And,
I
right?
can only
Like,
imagine you doing that.
I get the feeling that that is also something that he's doing in his class. Like, oh, what's this?
I know, right?
What's this?
yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was my favorite class. Um, and it was also another one of those classes that didn't feel like uh it didn't feel like it was coming from a particular bias, right? Which is something that I also very much appreciate, that it was the class where we could be open about ideas and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
um I mean, looking back on it, it was still very squarely within the framework of epistemology, but it didn't quite feel like that when we were
Yeah. Mm-mm.
taking it in high school. The other thing that it introduced was the philosophical concept of bullshit, which was pretty cool to hear in a high school,
Mm-mm.
right? Like, whoa. But then, the point was, what are we going to call a thing that is a statement wherein the truth is irrelevant? All that matters is that it is said. You know, saying that it is different from a lie, because a lie is there is still an acknowledgement of the truth. But what if there is a statement that is put out there by, say, an advertiser or a marketer or a salesperson or whatever, that is completely um, that doesn't take into consideration any sort of matter of truth? Well, Harry Frankfurt called it bullshit, and hearing that in a high school class was like, yeah. and we all thought we were so smart talking about it.
Yeah.
Right? Then it was
Interesting
the
knowledge.
it was another class where the books that we used didn't capitalize the G in God, because we weren't talking specifically about the Judeo-Christian God when talking about God. When talking about knowledge by faith,
Mm-mm.
so little things like that was sort of, I guess, putting me outside of what was my comfort zone, and it was rigorous. So that's another thing that I enjoyed about it. It was rigor. It's the same impulse that gets people to like things like math.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. So that was my favorite subject in high school. Theory of knowledge.
Thinking about high school, I just remember this. Did you guys have like a series of exams before your finals? Like in all of your subjects? Because from
Yeah.
high school that I went to, before we have the finals week, we have the so-called Hell Week, wherein
Mm-mm.
all of the subjects, without exceptions, they will give a 1 week's worth of test. And we go back
Mm-mm.
really from the first quarter up
Ouch.
until the fourth.
Well,
So from Monday to Friday, you will just be taking exam after exam after exam.
Mm-mm.
no.
I
Like we
can't
have that in high school.
remember.
I don't miss it.
Wala, wala,
Wala,
wala.
sir. But when I was starting ako sa first school na ko nag-teach yan, yung na ang setup, sir. Yeah, we call that one as mastery test. So, mastery test before the periodical test. So,
Periodic test.
Mm-mm.
1 week yun na siya.
Right?
I can't remember.
It was fun.
I like, I'm okay. But imagine me taking a math test for an entire week, and here I was thinking, I thought I'm done with you. Why am I answering things about you again?
Nah.
I went to, I don't know. I went to an IB school, so it was kind of worse because our big tests at the end of the program covered 2 years worth of
Ooh.
covered 2 years worth of material. So
Yeah.
everything from grade 11 and 12,
Comprehensive.
yeah,
Yeah,
was
yeah.
tested in
True.
like 2 or 3 exams at the end of the 2-year program.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So it was like all of the periodical tests that we had leading up to that were there to sort of help us answer this one test that covers 2 years worth of material.
Mm-mm.
So
So
imagine,
when you took that exam, did you study for it, or did you just say, "Oh well, I listened to all of the discussions anyway"?
I
How much
studied for it.
you studied for it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
studied for it. It was a lot of. It was like the fourth quarter, if I remember correctly. A lot of like the fourth quarter of the 12th grade was spent
Go back.
reviewing, yeah,
Uh,
reviewing the concepts from the past and sort
right.
of, you know, refreshing us on that. So at least it was fun. At least there was that.
Mm.
Hmm. The people that didn't take the IB were pretty chill during that last during that last quarter. They're like, yeah,
Mm-mm.
whatever. Our
But
test is gonna cover the fourth quarter. You guys have like 2 years worth. Like, oh.
But in college, we also have comprehensive exams, right? So I think it's a good preparation for college
True.
because
Yeah.
at least you already know the drill. So like you already have that discipline. You know already now these are the things that I need to keep. These are the things I need to review. This is how it feels like or what it feels like when it comes to taking a comprehensive exam. So it's not going to be super. Uh, you won't be to call this you said frightened, pero it's not something new to you
Mm.
because you already have the experience. Mm-mm.
You know, to my mind, that's something that's lacking in our current K to 12 program. That that test at the end. That
Oh,
that parang unifies the entire senior high school experience.
Mm-mm.
actually, sir, the depth ed, I think na sila gid na, di ba? We call that one as basic exit examination, murag something,
Oh,
but wala lang yun murag dili yun naka-strong ang kuan ba? Ang
mm-mm.
wala
Yeah.
feedback man, what happened,
Mm-mm.
the result, ana.
I
Pero I
think
think,
that's another
oh,
thing,
yun
no?
ang kuan unta dapat, right?
Mm-mm. Because we have a lot of koan, di ba? What you call this?
National achievement test.
National exams.
Oh,
But then I don't think there is proper feedbacking.
oh yeah, mao gid na.
Mm.
Pero what do you tell your students or your class, for example, because they take the national achievement test. What do you tell them in order for them to take the exam seriously?
Sa amo ang may case, sir, sa kay I been administering few pa naman gid na mga national kana asas ako ng national
Achievement.
achievement test nat no. Kuan, I think ang ako giingon kay the kanang it's not to assess you guys but to assess the curriculum, the school also,
Mm-mm.
kay mao man gyud na actually
Yes,
it's
it
not
won't
about
really. True.
no dili pa
Yeah.
gyud na para sa kada student yun as a whole
Mm-mm.
na whether
Yeah.
they learn something, so they have to take it seriously kay mo kwan mo bumira na magud na sa ila kay
Yeah.
sa ila man na as a batch,
Mm-mm.
di ba, entire batch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pero
Hi.
dili
But
man
I
gyapon
don't know.
dili man
It's
gyapon
a
sa mag pattern
yeah.
pattern.
It's a data gathering tool.
Yeah.
That's not what a test. A test should not. A test shouldn't be something that the National Statistics Office should have the most interest in.
Mm.
The results should be the most important to your colleges,
Mm-mm.
right? A national achievement test should be something that a potential college is going to look at when they're deciding whether or not to admit you, and not something that the National Statistics Office will use as a metric.
True. And to add on to that, the result of the National Achievement Test should be the jumping off point of the Department of Education to look into the curriculum.
Yeah.
Diba?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is there
Uh-uh.
a need to refashion it? Is there a need
Yeah.
to change it?
That's what
but
that's what
wala
I tell
sir.
the students. Cause like, diba, most of them it's okay, I'll just make patterns in my answer sheet. And we see a lot of students doing
True.
that. So what I told them, you have to take this seriously because the results is what your legislators will use when they craft new laws. So for example, you have K to 12 because they realize that students in terms of comprehension should understand
Yeah.
this or blah blah blah. So
So
you
the
don't
students
want
will now say, that's why we have K to 12 now, miss, because our kuyas and ates did not answer the national achievement test properly.
so it's like, oh, so do you want an additional year? Yung
But then,
panghadlok
di
ay.
ba?
Yeah.
Na But then
Inang
at the end of the day, like what I will always say is, yeah, at the end of the day, the reason you do well in the national achievement test is it reflects badly on the school if we get too many people failing that test.
Yeah.
And if that becomes the reputation of the school that you come from, congratulations, you've just devalued your diploma.
Mm-mm. True.
Correct.
True.
True.
And so that's the incentive that we give the students to you know you don't want a worthless diploma when you're applying for work or when you're applying for college, because you know that's not cool.
Mm-mm.
Well, like at the end of the day, that's really how we should be selling it, and
Mm-mm.
not
True.
as
Yeah.
because that's the reality of it.
I
In other
remember
words, if
before,
there are students that are listening to this and are like, the national achievement test is useless, no, it's not.
It's not.
Yeah.
Not
It's
is
it's
not
it's
useless.
not useless. The reason that your school has the reputation that it does is partly because of the national achievement test results.
True. True.
If your school doesn't have a good reputation, you might want to start taking that test a little bit more seriously. And if your school has a good reputation, take the test seriously. That way, you can maintain that reputation.
Yeah. And whether we like it or not, the school, the name of your school really matters.
Yeah.
Like, before people test your competency on something, sometimes they tend to look at your school first.
You're back.
This is actually a topic for another time, no?
I know, right?
Yes.
And it's going to be like quite a controversial topic.
Mm-hmm.
Where we'll be using stuff like the maroon school, the green school, the blue school,
Why not?
Why
the
not?
school that keeps on flooding.
I bet there are a lot of schools that fall under that category.
Like that along the university belt, the university river.
And to get away with the flood, you have to perform like American Ninja Warrior skills.
Yeah.
From one point to
True.
another.
True. At least they're not only testing your brains, but also your physical strength and your.
Oh well, thank goodness we're online. Wow.
wala
No?
na yan.
The baha again.
But the problem is, di ba before, if naulan na ng strong rain, na walay klase dayon. But karon, naman gyapon.
Hapon.
Asynchronous, but wala gyapon. Of course, you're there to assess the students from gyapon.
Yeah.
Pros and cons
Mm-mm.
to the
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
Pero okay kayo man ron. At least marag na-appreciate na nako, sir, na yun na yung online class. Okay na.
Good.
Ang concern lagi nako sa checking of
Well, speaking of, I still have a lot of things to check.
yeah, ako sa as in,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I can't go on. I can't check for extended periods of time in the way that I used to, because like my head starts to hurt after.
Understandable, yeah.
Yeah,
True.
tinod.
True.
After my 3 classes, off na gyud nako ang kuan.
Yeah.
Gadget.
Okay, sakit na kayo sa ulo.
Right. Like at the end of the day,
Your brain is
why am
fried.
I? Yeah.
You're like a zombie.
Yeah. Why am
Anyway, I
teaching?
guess that's how we end our episode for tonight.
Congratulations to the four of us. Huh? We have now carried the conversation through for
Yeah.
more than an hour.
I actually have another question, but I guess it's something that we can reserve for the next episode.
What is the question?
What
That way
is
we can put it as a little teaser.
So kinakalimut ko sa kong question. What it has something to do with what do you call this? Online teaching. Wait, ito na ako. Na-tense ko, nakalimut na noon ko. Ang sa tag-ingon ni Jovit ganina nga, na-appreciate niya ang online teaching. It has something to do with appreciating teaching. Something.
Go, miss.
Give me time. Give me a week.
Wait.
Pero bitaw, I'll try to remember it. Nakalimut ko. Pero kabalo ko interesting to. Makaremember ako mga after 2 minutes. Wait. Ayoko i-time eh.
You're tired. Bitaw, nice bitaw gid ang online class na. I don't know sa on part of the student but so far based on our conversations sa akong advisory, they started ko ano man sad pod.
Appreciating it.
appreciating the setup ba.
That's what we call Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, that's what I told my students earlier. Good for us adults because we can already go out, no? Yeah, just have to wear protection and make sure that we're safe. But for them, they're still not allowed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There's still
they're compelled to stay at home.
Mm-mm.
my problema but
I mean that's part of part of what I do with my class. Like the reason that I cut out so much was um I give the students time to talk to each other about the material. That way I can simulate interaction.
Mm-mm.
True.
So like instead of having an asynchronous session and then the synchronous session for the topic, I will give them the asynchronous session. Then I'll give them one period to talk in their groups about the material that they went through, and then we have the synchronous session. That way they can, that way, not only can they deepen their understanding, blah, 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 and all of that good stuff, but that way they can actually talk to each other.
let's see.
It's true.
And well, it works for my subject, but for something like math, maglisod na.
Yeah, sa ako sir, they prefer maganin to have synchronous session all throughout the week. But of course, that's not possible man kay we have schedule ko an. So every time yun mag-synchronous, ako yun ang bida. Ako tanan. If I ask them to answer something ani, it will take time man. So sayang kayo ang time ba during synchronous. So I give them materials to answer. Then we discuss that one during synchronous on how to deal with especially those mga difficult questions.
Then
Yan
nagkuhan.
ako ang style.
Wa pagyapon ako na-remember akong nahunahunan ganina nga
Did
topic.
you try ako and Sir Joao
With
this
myself.
darkness discussion method? Have you tried?
Sort of. What I do is, I give them the module. I give them like guide questions that they have to answer in their class notebook,
Hmm.
and then for the next day, I have them break out into small groups and share their answers to those questions with each other and record the session.
Mm.
So it's sort of like a Harkness discussion, but then it's very guided because of the questions that they had time to answer and like let percolate for 24 hours. And then cool said kay nang it they get to see how talking about material that they go through by themselves can potentially lead, or how it can get deeper when they bring it up with other people, and they feel a lot more prepared for the synchronous session where I'm actually asking them questions na.
What I like about that is that it reinforces the idea that other students, their group mates, can actually enrich the idea that they have.
Yeah.
Or invalidate it if, for example, it's really wrong.
Mm-mm. So kuan siya. The problem lang yun is that it's very very time consuming.
True, true.
But then, given our current context, I would rather have time consuming than them not talking to each other.
True. Sige, Miss Ling, are you ready?
Wala
Okay, next time na
gyapon.
lang.
Next time na lang basin makahuna-huna ko